Your story isn't the truth of who you are. It's a map of your soul's curriculum. In today's episode of The Mike Method, I'm joined live from Brazil by Celinne Costa, author, speaker, and master coach, who helps high-achieving leaders rewrite the invisible narratives running their lives so they can lead with real alignment, presence, and influence. Celinne's work blends deep inner transformation with practical tools. She's trained in modalities like NLP and hypnotherapy, and she's known for helping executives get out of survival mode and back into conscious choice. This conversation is a masterclass in one idea. Your life keeps repeating the lesson until you learn it. We unpack why the map is not the territory, how old stories hijack leaders in high-stakes rooms, and what it actually takes to neutralize emotional charge so you can respond, not react. You'll also hear a simple language shift that instantly upgrades identity work from I'm becoming to I choose that I am, and why that distinction matters when you're trying to build new habits, new leadership, and a new future. And then Celinne takes us into her upcoming book, The Burning Ground, the 10-year in the making odyssey that began when she left prestigious New York life behind, couch surfed through 18 countries, stayed with 70 strangers, and discovered what happens when you burn down an old identity to find the truest version of yourself on the other side. Let's dive in. Live from Brazil, Celinne, thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to having this conversation. I can already tell it's going to be riveting.
Well, and it's riveting because you love telling stories and you love unleashing the stories that are inside of all of us. And I'd love to hear the why behind that.
I love that you're starting us off with the big questions. Let me dig in. Let me start with a question.
Yeah.
Do you feel when you look back at the tapestry of your life, do you see patterns in terms of what life is asking of you?
Absolutely.
Like you immediately came up with something. Okay, just give me the first thing that came to mind where you're like, absolutely.
Well, I would say it's in the zones of my life or the roles that I play. So, I was fundamentally how I've evolved as a man, right? I've seen the story arc of that. I've seen my own version of a hero's journey trying to sort out what it means to be me in the world, what it means to be a man in the world, and what that means from a character perspective, from a reasoned choice perspective. I saw that arc in what it meant to be a partner with my wife, and then, what it meant to be a husband. I saw that arc with when my daughter was born. I remember walking back from the hospital to go pick up a breast pump from the house, which was pretty close to the hospital. And I remember thinking about this responsibility. I was somebody's father's. She was going to talk about me as my dad, ... My dad taught me, my dad said, my dad always ... I'm like, I'm that guy. Like, I just realized the weight of that, the responsibility of that, and the pure joy that came from recognizing that I was going to be that person in someone's life. And then from an entrepreneurial perspective, I've seen this journey over the past 26 years of diving into something and really surfing the waves while fighting the current a lot of the time.
Thank you.
There's definitely each of those things is its own story. And, at the same time, each of those stories would collapse upon each other because they're all part of the same me. And many of these things happen concurrently.
Thank you for sharing that. And follow-up question on that. Is there something that since you were a little boy, you just knew? And then maybe later on, you read it in the books and you understood it cognitively and other people validated it, but you just knew this to be true.
That when people are stuck, they come to me.
There you go. Ooh, got chills when I heard that. So I want to now loop back into your question, why story?
Yeah.
I knew from when I was a little girl that story was everything. And as I grew older and as I began to do this for work and I began to study the books and learn the texts and, study from the sages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what became clear to me is that story is everything. Everything that you think you are is a story. What you and I are doing right now is we are communicating stories with each other with the intention to connect and understand one another. When you are speaking to your team, you are communicating a story so that they can understand and connect with the vision that you have for the thing that you want them to do that they're a part of. When you are communicating with your partner and you're having a bit of a shuffle. You're advocating for the story of what it is that you believe is to be true, with the intention, if it's a healthy relationship, of coming into a shared story that you can both live a part of. And so when we look at what it means to be human, Mike, it's story. And this is not new technology that got invented recently. This is not a trend, right? Like, this is something as old as time, as old as those paintings that were in the cave before we even knew how to write. And so storytelling and story, to me, is why I do it, is because everything, all that I am, all the relationships that I have, and everything I create into the world comes back down to what is the story I'm here to tell. And whether I'm telling that story unconsciously or if I am telling it consciously.
And so it's I love the differentiation there of saying, like, the story is being told. So that's like a fait accompli, right? Like, it's being told. So whether it's unconsciously being told and it's just sort of happening out there, or I'm conscious about it. And I guess, for anybody listening to this, they're probably thinking, as I am right now, I want to be consciously telling that story. I don't want that story to be unconsciously happening. I mean, if I am conscious about it long enough, then I guess I would be okay with it coming out of, unconsciously, because it is sort of embedded in who I am. I'm curious then, as you went through this work and these realizations, like, you came up with this term, story atlas. And so walk me through how story atlas fits into this conversation.
Story Atlas I did not come up with. Story Atlas came to me in 2017. I was in Peru, and it was right off the back end of a ceremony, and the words Story Atlas came to me. And inherently I knew that this was my mission. Now, at the time, I'm like, is this like a travel company? Is this like a travel agency? I'm not really sure what I'm doing with this. And I didn't do anything with it. I sat with it. I sat in it, and I contemplated it for years and years and years. And recently, actually as recent in the last couple of years, it began to make sense. It began informing me. It began telling me what did it want to become in the world, and how was I there to steward that mission. And the words Story Atlas, they're very coded, right? There's a lot of meaning in there. There's a literal meaning, and then there's more mythical meanings underneath it. But when we think, actually, let me ask you before I start and tell you my definition. When I say to you the word Story Atlas, if you just feel that in your body, or you like receive it, what comes to mind?
It's interesting because when I first read it, I looked at the words separately, right? So I looked at the word story and I looked at the word atlas. And the first part I started thinking about is the globe. I started thinking about travel. I started thinking about started thinking about journeys. Right. And so it got me thinking about hero journeys. So that's where I originally went with it, was that the Story Atlas would actually be like a compendium of journeys, because there isn't just like, there's like little stories that can coalesce to become the main story. Like the arcs all pulled together, as I said before, in these different roles, but they come into one thing. So that's where I originally went with it. And then I'm like, I don't know if I'm right or not, but I'm super curious to understand, and I don't need to be right, but I'm like, that's my version of it, which is fine. But I was really curious to understand what it means to you.
Well, like with any good story, it can have many different interpretations, right? And that's good. If you've had your own experience, if you went on your own journey with it, then it's already starting to do its job, right? Because it's not just about my definition, it's about whatever it wants to become. But I'll share with you what it means to me specifically.
Please.
So when I think about Story Atlas, the first image that came to me is the image, like you said, of a globe, right? Or more specifically, a map. And then I start to see, okay, this is the map of your story. And at first I took it literally, and I said, oh, it's the map of your story. I got it. But that's when things started to drop in deeper, because what I realized is this, and one of my teacher's words came back to me. Have you ever heard the quote, "The map does not mark the territory"?
No. Love that quote.
So what this means is, you think about the world map, right? And the map is like, any one of us can literally close our eyes right now, and we can think about, have it literally, like even as a tattoo on my arm. Right. There's a map. This is Africa. This is Italy. This is how big this thing, right? The way that a map is drawn does not guarantee that it's the territory it's marking is correct. And even there's like even a whole argument, for example, that the map was drawn by, European colonialists, and that they made Africa look a lot smaller than it actually is in the map to start to, control people's perception of what the world looked like and how powerful Europe actually was. So it's things like that where you can draw a map to something and it's not necessarily an accurate reflection of what the truth is, of what the territory is. And so the same thing goes with our story, that the story if I were to ask you, if you and I were to sit down, Mike, I'm like, tell me the entire story of your life. Like, tell me the story. I want to know. You would give me your map, but your map does not tell me if that's actually the territory. And the way that we know what the territory is the truth of who you really are, the truth of who you are. And so what I realized through my work, there came a moment where it dawned on me that the story is not actually the map, that actually the story, what it is a map of your soul's curriculum. It's not a map of the truth of who you are.
Soul's curriculum, not the truth of who you are. Okay. Say more about that.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I will clarify that.
Yeah.
If you look at your entire life, there is events in your lives, like the way that your parents treated you, the way that you grew up, the country you grew up in, the hardships you had, the challenges that you had. And we can look at it through different lenses of perception. Lens of perception, number one, is this happened to me. Step one, like linear. First this happened, then I was 30, and then this happened, then this happened, 32. And then you can kind of map it out in a hero's journey. Or you can choose to change your level of perception, and you can start to see that everything that happened in your life was a mirror of what life wanted you to become and what you're being invited to step into, and whether you're doing it or not, right? Every time you burnt out is an invitation for you to find joy and balance in your life. And if it keeps happening over and over again, then what your soul's asking of you is for you to find that joy and balance in your life, right? Every time, I'm thinking about it, you've attracted a toxic woman or a man in a relationship with you, and now you have a string of situationships and toxic relationships that you've had. What if that's not just you having bad luck? What if that's your soul being like, hey, look at the way you're relating and resolve it so that you can evolve as a man, as a woman. So when we start to actually perceive our story through the curious lens of what is it that my soul, what is it that my higher self is attempting to convey to me through the events of my life, now we get to play with something much more interesting, which is the conscious creation of our story instead of defaulting into what usually happens, which is your story ends up being a map of the subconscious patterning that you hold, the belief systems, the conditioning, whatever you've been before you consciously chose that you were going to become someone else. Your story holds that. It's all of that. And so there's a reason why it's not called story map. It's called an atlas. Your atlas is also, it's a bone right underneath the cranium, right? And in shamanic traditions, your atlas is also the place that holds all of your memories from all of your life. Right. And so there's different layers, but what ultimately comes down to is this. When we look at our story and we choose to look at it from a level of perception that is conscious and it is in alignment to who we're here to become, the story looks completely different than when we're just telling it linearly because someone asked us what it is. It's it's relating to the story. And the atlas is you can literally you can put your consciousness at any moment in your story, anywhere. You can move it backwards, forwards, and you can drop in and you can choose to look at it completely differently than you were before. And in that moment, your entire past rewrites itself. And now you're free to rewrite your future consciously.
What I love about this approach is that, it takes away the externalization of the world is out to get me, the victimhood piece of it, because it innately has self-responsibility wrapped into it, which is that I am the architect of everything. And there was a journey that I needed to be on to learn these lessons. And without going on that journey, I couldn't have learned these lessons, which wouldn't have led me to where I am right now. And it's interesting when you think about the concept of gratitude in that context, because I think, well, if I'm grateful for everything that I have today, then how can I not appreciate the journey that brought me here? Because that journey, that arc brought me here. Now, if there's repetitive patterns that I don't think, as you say, are serving me well, and I've been the architect of them the whole time. And now when I recognize that pattern, I think what I hear you saying is that I can now look back on all these various stories that I've told about things that have happened, people that have harmed me, events that have harmed, whatever, right? Things that I look back on in life and say, well, ooh, wait a second. No, this was my soul, my subconscious, the universe, whatever your belief pattern is, trying to send me a message. And I needed to go through these things time and time again because I wasn't getting it. I just wasn't getting the message that needed to come through. And once I get the message, now it sounds like I now would have the ability to make reasoned choices from a stoic, I'm using that's a stoic principle, but I now have the ability to make different choices moving forward that are in alignment with what I know is truly in my soul. Whereas before, I might have been just running on this sort of, I'll use the words autopilot, programming that I was unaware of, that was unconscious. Now I'm conscious that this is a thing and I don't want it to happen anymore. And even if it does happen again, which can happen, even when we're aware, it doesn't mean we might not do it again, but I know I've done it again. Whereas in the past, I didn't even know I was doing it again. It just kept repeating itself. And it seemed like, it was, why does this keep happening? Like it's some sort of great mystery.
But it's not a great mystery when we start to look at it as, when we start to shift our perception to what is it that life is endeavoring to teach me. If I am on the path of becoming the greatest that I am here to be, if I am on the path of actually walking the timeline of my destiny, if that's what I'm choosing for myself for this life, which I presume that everyone, if not, most people, not everyone on this in this conversation will resonate with, then everything I've lived up until this point has served me.
Right.
Because it has led me to the place that where I have become the resilient, intelligent, strong, business savvy, whatever your strengths are, person that you've become. And at the same time, all the places and spaces where you're still holding yourself back continue to be stories you're telling yourself about yourself. And so, it's amazing because if we look at, for example, the very thing that you may feel the most ashamed about, and you carry that for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your life, the moment that you shift your level of perception, looking at the stories and being like, yeah, but I'm ashamed of this thing. I'm ashamed of this, of my weight because of this time when I was 5 and they pushed me, this time that I was 15 and this happened, and this time when I was in college and I was rejected. And we start to build up a case for the reasons why we're ashamed, for the reasons why we have to keep ourselves small. But if we actually start to see that all of that was happening for us, all of that was happening so we can learn something, in this case, it might be to learn how to treat your body well and to be healthy, then when you get it and you actually make a conscious decision that you are going to change that behavioral pattern and you're actually going to act in accordance to the version of you who's walking the path of your destiny, then you can look back at all of those stories and they rewrite themselves in a second, the moment that you choose to look at them as blessings for why you became who you are and you're making the choice that you're making today, right? Or a tangible example, if, let's say for a man, you're afraid to be a father and then a woman becomes pregnant, but now you're like, I'm not a good father because your father beat you your entire life, and you treated this woman like crap and you treated this woman like crap, and you have an entire trail history of all the ways that you've been a shitty man. What most people will do is they'll take that and copy and paste it into who they're going to become because that's who they've been, so that's who they're going to be. As opposed to, no, there's a life coming on this planet. I need to change. I need to shift myself and then start doing that work. And there comes a point that if that man is choosing to step into fatherhood and to step into being the best possible man that he can be, he will look at all those moments where he mistreated a woman, where he was abused, where that happened. He'll be like, oh my God, this has taught me how I never ever want to be again. I know what it's like to be abused. So I'm going to make a stand for those who have been abused. I have treated people not well. So I'm going to apologize and I'm going to grow and I'm going to make up for what it is that I did. And I am going to now show my son or daughter what it's actually like to grow up in a healthy masculine setting, right? So all of that crap alchemizes into fodder for your greatness. But again, that's a choice point of whether you want it to be your greatness or whether you want to keep kind of repeating the past. But either way, life is mirroring back to you. This is your material. You can either work on it and transmute it, or you can just keep doing the same thing over and over again, in which case you will be the same person, and in which case you will not be experiencing any different kind of results than anything you've experienced in the past because you're doing the same thing.
It sounds like, from a blind spot perspective, these are like giant blind spots that are following us through life. And without the choice to have deeper self-awareness, those blind spots will just continue. I think in Plato's Apology, he quotes Socrates, this wonderful quote, which is the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think what I hear you saying is that without taking the time to step back and say, hey, what is behind all of these stories that I keep telling? I'm the central character. because I'm in the stories, right? So clearly the one thing that's common is me. So then if it's me, then what do I need to be considering? I think for me, when I became a father, as I was walking home that night, I was standing I took our dog out to pee. I was standing on the side of the road. It was raining. And I realized that I had given so freely of my time, like it was an unlimited resource, to people that were takers, to literally anybody who wanted my time. And all of a sudden there's this little life that is now the most, her and her mom, my wife, are now the most important things in my world. And where I want my time and energy to go just shifted significantly. And that has not changed. And the most poignant moment from when my daughter was young, we were driving in the car and her friend said to her, "Oh, is your dad coming to our game this week? I'm not sure if my dad's going to be there. I'm pretty sure he has to work." And my daughter's response was, "Well, my dad will just tell the people in the meeting that the meeting needs to move because he'll be there." And Sabrina was in the passenger seat. I started like tearing up as I was driving and I said to her after we got out of the car, I'm like, I've been so conscious about this because I made this decision when she was born and I just didn't think she even noticed. Like it was a choice that I made about how I wanted to show up as a father that was going to be very different from the way that I thought about my time prior to when she was born. And I did it because it was how I wanted to show up in the world, but I didn't even think she knew. And to have her at a young age, like she was 6 or 7 years old, maybe, to say that out loud was quite a poignant moment. I was just about to wreck that moment because if my daughter was here, she would be doing the 6-7-6-7 thing in front of us right now. So, but yeah, I hear you on the importance of this examination. And I think it's also taking responsibility for our lives. It feels like what I hear you saying is like, take responsibility that your soul's trying to send you a message. It's up to me to listen to it. And everything that's happened, I have been responsible for in some way. And that's hard to hear because it's easier to say no other people or situations have harmed me in some way.
Yeah. So what we're really, and I'm so happy you're picking up on this because the conversation that we're really having underneath this is the shift from survival state, feeling powerless, helpless, disconnected, a victim of ... your reality, and the shift that we must make in our evolution, which is coming into the state of creator, or I like to think of it as co-creator with God, source, universe. It is the state of us coming into our power and actually realizing that we're powerful beings and we're also meaning making machines. And storytelling is what allows us to make that meaning and convey it. Life is going to be the meaning that we give it. And this is the conversation that I love to have with my clients and with friends and people in from all kinds of different religions and backgrounds, because to me, my preferred word is God. That's just my word. Some people like universe, some people like source. So I just kind of like slash it up, source, God, universe, whatever you want. Some people are like, I'm a freaking atheist. Great. Yeah. If you're an atheist, that's cool as well, because none of that actually shifts what we're saying, which is life create what we have, what we call life is the meaning that we choose to give it. So whether you want to argue that we're going to give this meaning and then we're going to die and we're going to be dust and then nothing else happens, or we want to argue that this meaning is given to us by like some divine hand or divine order, or we're doing it together, or soul's kind of like giving us some kind of meaning and then someone else is stepping in and there's an angel that's coming, like whoever you want to add to the mix of that, it doesn't shift that this is my life. This is your life. Like I'm responsible for my life. You're responsible for your life. And how I feel about my life is up to me. And it also doesn't change that there are feelings, like we can agree that when you feel joyful and you feel at peace, you feel good. There's a lightness in your body, right? Like it feels nice. It's regenerative. And we can go into the whole science of how it literally is regenerative to feel happy and joyful and at peace and at ease. And equally, we can agree that when you feel stressed out and when you feel angry and when you feel like upset and disappointed, that feels really crappy in the body. And again, we could go into the science that it's very proven that emotional stress does create disease in the body. That when we're consistently overproducing in adrenaline and cortisol, we get adrenal fatigue. We burn out. Like there's a whole, like, this is not fluff. It's real. And so then we have What?
Gabor Mate actually wrote
Yeah.
a book that's called When the Body Says No, that is all
Yeah.
about this concept. There's another one, I forget the author's name, called The Body Keeps Score, which basically
Yeah. I
underscores
love that book.
everything you're saying, which is like there's a running tally happening inside our body, and these physical manifestations of it are really a buildup over time of not listening.
Yeah, exactly. And we ask ourselves, if life is the meaning that we choose to give it, and the meaning that we choose to give it is going to be determined by how we feel about it. Because if you're feeling really, really good, then, and I ask you, what's the meaning of life, Mike? You're going to give me a very
Right.
different answer than
Yeah.
if you're very stressed out, burnt out, upset, and you don't really know what the hell you're doing with yourself. Right.
Yeah.
So the way that our emotional state is going to determine how we believe our meaning of life is. And when we look at what is determining our emotional state, well, it's the thoughts that we're thinking. It's the beliefs that we have. So now we look at all the stories that we're telling ourselves, and are those stories directing us to believe that we are powerful, that we're blessed by grace, that we are abundant beings? Is the story that we're telling ourselves really empowering us, putting us in our power? Or is it making us feel small and weak and shameful and like we can't put ourselves out there because someone's going to judge us or make us feel small? So whether you are of the school of the spiritual side of this conversation that we're having, or you want to be really practical and scientific about it and screw all of spiritual stuff, it doesn't really change what we're talking about, which is that the brain works a specific way. We as human beings have a certain modus operandus. And when we start to view our story and we start to change and modify the stories that we tell ourselves so that they are in alignment to the goals that we want to reach in our lives, to the kind of identity that we want to identify as, change those stories, it's going to change how we feel about ourselves, and it's going to change the meaning that we are assigning to the life that we have. And that's going to either going to make us feel good, and by extension of that, it's going to make us feel empowered, like we have a agency over our lives. Like you said, we have responsibility, we have ability to respond to the life that we have. Or it's going to make us feel like we're shit and we're helpless and we're victims and life is happening to us and we can't crawl out of this hole. And then there's the whole spectrum in between. Underneath it all is we are at choice. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying it starts with an empowered decision.
It's interesting because in that place of an empowered decision, I think one of the things that I learned along the way is not to make decisions with long-term consequences from a place of short-term emotions. So where I feel like if I had a week where I'm tired and maybe I didn't sleep well and then something frustrated me, that is a terrible place to be considering long-term consequences and decisions. And a better place to operate from when I'm feeling that way is, what do I need to do today? Like just today, what do I need to get done today that would make today a success? Don't worry about what all of this means in the long run, or am I in the right path? Or like when we're feeling down or bummed out, it's a terrible place to be doing a life examination. Now, that isn't to say, I think that, if over a prolonged period of time, you feel like you're not really moving the direction you want to go, then yeah, I would listen to that. But if it's a short-term emotion, or you feel tired, you feel run down, hungover, whatever it is, something that's throwing you off your center, making any decision that has long-term consequences is just, I've learned that's not the right place to operate from. The second thing I wanted to sort of riff on from what you said is this place of reason, choice, and meaning making. Like, in the Stoic tradition, it says things are going to happen to us in our life. And as you say, right, we are meaning making machines. And it's up to us to decide what the meaning is. And we're allowed to have it make no meaning. We're allowed to, it's like I've said to friends before, they're telling me about, some situation that happened. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really always attend all the arguments I'm invited to. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like sometimes like people are frustrated, or I don't know. I don't always attend all those arguments. I might have been invited to them, but like I can choose to be neutral about it. And it's actually a very lovely place to like roll through the world, to decide to just not get into it. And so I think what I hear you saying is that, hey, if we're going to make meaning in our lives, we can either choose things to have a negative meaning and negative consequences, which can, sometimes send us into like a downward spiral, or we can take that same set of facts and be neutral, or we could say, hey, maybe there's something in this. Maybe there is a positive way to think about this. And this isn't just like turn your lemons into lemonade. I mean, it kind of is, but at the same time, you're like, cool, it's a lemon. Like the end. No, I don't like lemons. No, they're sour. No, I can turn it into lemonade. There's also just that's a lemon. That's always a choice that we have. And I think that, we're pre-programmed to need it to be good or bad, to be the polarities and not just sit into the gray of it's just a lemon. That's
You got it. You got it. Baseline of what you're saying. It's neutralize it. Just as a
yeah,
baseline, do yourself a favor and neutralize it. And again, I appreciate when I'm saying this. I just want to appreciate that what I'm speaking into is a journey. It's an internal hero's journey, right? Like when I'm working with clients, sometimes it's not just neutralize it. It takes sometimes months,
yeah,
months to really just. There's a whole process that goes underneath looking at the parts that, like, if there's a series of events in your life that created a lot of suffering for you. I'm not saying this from a place of like, oh, that like abuse you went, just neutralize it. That is
yeah,
not the place
no,
I am coming from. And I just want to
yeah,
disclaimer that. I
absolutely.
honor and respect that if we zoom into like, what are those moments that most created suffering in your life? There's complexities, right? There's a lot that we get to look at, heal from, overcome. So I just want to honor the process of what it
Hmm.
actually takes to do something like this. And for the sake of this conversation, it's about finding that place within yourself where there's no longer an emotional charge that hijacks your nervous system and
Right,
prevents you from actually thinking clearly and making choices. And let me land this with a very tangible example, because I work with a lot of, for example, executives in the corporate
right.
world, as well as entrepreneurs. But specifically in the corporate work, I see this a lot, very, very prevalent, which is that like people at senior levels, right, in the workplace are getting triggered because someone's not communicating the way that they want to, and they're kind of saying that they're communicating with each other, but they're not really they're not really seeing it clearly. They're being passive aggressive. They're skirting around the bush instead of clearly communicating. And you wouldn't believe how many people that are like very, very competent adults are defaulting into reactions that is basically their 5-year-old. It's like they start to treat their boss like their boss is their father,
Yeah.
and like their abusive father is their boss. And now it starts to become this like, you need to like work out your trauma in the workplace situation, because they haven't healed from the suffering of their story. So they continue to project their own pain of, having a dysfunctional relationship with mother or father, or,
Hmm.
having growing up, in a really difficult socioeconomic standpoint. And because they haven't metabolized the pain and the suffering that comes from the reality that they lived, their lived experience, they then begin to project that story into the external world, which, as you
Right.
can imagine, is literally going to impact bottom line. Like
Yeah.
now it's going to create toxicity in the culture, because now a leader who's supposed to model how to, they're supposed to model how to communicate, now starts to get really passive aggressive when they're overwhelmed, because that's what they learned to do as a child. Or they begin to have very difficult relationship with their superiors or with other people in the team that they're supposed to get along with so that we can move things along. But now they're like kind of fighting out and reliving their own unmetabolized stories. And the whole freaking project slows down, and it starts to cost money and time and energy. And there's real tangible consequences to the company, not to mention to themselves.
Hmm.
And so when we get to that point where we can neutralize the shame that we feel, the suffering that we feel, to get to that place where we can come at peace with it and be like you said, it's a lemon. Yes, that happened to me. No, it was not my fault.
Hmm.
Right. And holding that compassion and being like, okay, I'm going to learn from this, and I'm going to learn how to be and how not to be based on this experience that I've had, rather than
Hmm.
every time it's coming, your nervous system clogs up and you're like upset and you're feeling triggered. And then you lose half of your day feeling stressed out about the thing that happened. Like that's you being hijacked by the
Hmm.
old story. So if you can neutralize it, when you can do that, then something really, really cool starts to happen, because you start to ask yourself the bigger questions instead of trying to cope with, how do I deal with this discomfort that's inside of me that I don't know how to deal with. So I'm going to distract, I'm going to numb, sex, drugs, alcohol, social media scrolling. I'm going to go
Hmm.
out, get like with the bros and get drunk, like forget about this. Like instead of that, you start to think about, okay, who do I want to become? And the
Hmm.
version of me who has, doubled my business revenue, the version of me who is a father or a mother, the version of me who is a husband or a wife, the version of me who, insert your ideal life and what you envision for yourself, for the life you love, that version of me, how would he or she act in this moment? What would she do? What would she say? And you start to, instead of sourcing all the reasons that oh, but I can't do it because, when I was younger, this happened to me. You start to actually look at your story all over again, and you start to source all the moments in your story, in your life, where you did act that way, where you did do it the right way. You start to build up a different case for yourself, different evidence from the same exact story. You're just looking at it from a different lens of perception.
Right.
And you start to look at all the times you were brave, all the times you did overcome yourself, all the times you did do this. And you start to build up a case of, I can do this. I can be different. And when you start to actually stop treating your story as the thing that's like hooking you in and producing gratuitous shame and suffering, because every time you think about it, it's like you're reliving it all over again. You actually start to look at it as, this is my curriculum. What did I learn? Okay, this is who I am. I know I am this. I know I am this. I know I am this. And you start to build yourself up with the same exact material, but now you're building yourself up into who you want to become. Tremendous amounts of empowered decision-making that needs to come into this. It is a big choice, and it is a lot of rewiring your brain. There's a whole neurology around, neuroscience around how to rewire your brain for change. But just like, we're entrepreneurs here. You learned how to do accounting or how to hire the right place, right? We learned how to build funnels. Like we learned how to do hard stuff, right? We can learn how to rewire our brain for our own greatness and tell a story of our success rather than keep repeating the one that's keeping us little.
What I love about the way you're describing this is that it says, hey, the trauma still happened. Like it still is, it was traumatic to you. It did occur. You didn't want this thing to happen to you. You still have the memory that it occurred. What you're not carrying forward is the trauma into the future, because you don't want that trauma affecting your future. You still have the experience. It still happened. You still have a memory of it. And yet now, as you're making decisions and deciding who you are in the world, it isn't influenced by the trauma. There might have been a lesson that came from it, maybe not, maybe you don't have the lesson yet, but at least the trauma isn't informing your future. One of the things I started doing maybe, I think it's like 3 or 4 years ago now, is I started thinking about my goals and my habits. And then I started thinking about the roles that I play in my life. And so now what I do each year is I write statements like, I'm a man. So I am becoming a man who, I'm becoming a husband who, I'm becoming a father who, I'm becoming a leader who, I'm becoming an entrepreneur, I'm becoming a mentor, I'm becoming a friend who, and I write out the statement of who I'm becoming. And I focus on those statements as much as I focus on the goals that I've set for the year. And I review those weekly. And then I think back about the situations that I was in over the past week. And I think, did I demonstrate that I am becoming a person like that? And the reason that I didn't write the statements as I am a man who is the problem with that from an NLP perspective, and also just from a from an overall psychology perspective, is if I say I am a ... my brain's instant response is, no, you're not, right? But if I say I'm becoming, my brain's like, all right, well, okay, like that might be possible, right?
So can I offer a little reframe there in
please,
the spirit of NLP? Because I am becoming, now you're saying it's over there. So here's an offering. What if you were to say, just to kind of like, for your brain to not be like, no, you're not. I choose that I am.
Oh, I love that.
It's a bridge.
I choose that I am a man who.
Yes, because so at any moment, you can recall that, you can call that choice forward.
Yeah.
Because when we say I am becoming wealthy,
right.
it's like
somewhere
over there, the thing that I'm becoming is there, but you're in the process of becoming. So you're in the process. So you're then creating the process for yourself. But when you say I choose that I am, you can be in a moment where you're definitely not being. And in that moment, you can choose that you are. And the moment you choose it, you are that man. You're not becoming, you are. Because it's going to be a series of your choices compounded. And then you're going to get to the point where you don't need to even say that you choose it, because you are. It's now, and again, going back to that 95%, people say anywhere between 80 to 95% is our subconscious, of like our thoughts and our decisions and what we're making is pre-programmed behavior. And then let's go with the 95%. The 5% is you consciously choosing, this is what I want to do. this is who I am. And even when we look at, I know I should do better. Why am I not doing it? Because you're defaulting into the 95%, which is your subconscious programs. But this is something you said in the beginning as well, which is absolutely correct, which is that when you're saying, I choose that I am this man or woman, I choose that I am, I choose that I am, that I choose that I am, and you insert enough conscious repetition into that, there comes a moment where you just are. And now that 5% becomes it gets tucked away in the 95% that you are on autopilot. It becomes part of your identity. And so the story that we are before we choose is everything you've ever been, everything that your story is, and the lens of perception through which you view your story is who you are on an identity level. It's that 95%. But the moment you start to exercise your right to choose your story, to choose your life, you start to see like, no, I'm choosing my story. In the beginning, the same way that, if you're really stuck on the habit of not going to the gym and you're like, okay, I choose that I am fit, like I am healthy. So get the sneakers on, and there's like a momentum and there's friction of you like changing that habit in those first few months. But then you do it enough times and it becomes a moment where that's part of who you are. It's your new identity. And so you don't have to sit there being like, I choose that I am, I choose that I am. It's like, of course I'm going to go to the gym. What else am I going to do this morning? Right. And then it liberates bandwidth for you to continue to choose who you are somewhere else. So you see how we get to like reprogram our entire subconscious mind consciously.
So grateful for that upgrade. That is such a powerful upgrade to those statements. I'm going into my day one journaling app and I am updating the statements as soon as we're done here.
Perfect.
If I was listening to this podcast right now, my thought would be, as a listener, please tell me she has a book.
I have a book.
So tell us about the book.
Of course. Yes. So I am on the verge of publishing a book 10 years in the making, this beautiful labor of love. It is called The Burning Ground. It's one woman's journey to reclaim her soul and ignite her inner fire. That's the first time I've spoken the subtitle out loud, by the way. Well, not out loud, but out loud, like for someone else to listen to, to be accountable for, right? This book it's an odyssey. It's similar to, have you ever read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho by any chance?
Yes, absolutely.
My favorite book of all.
Early on. Yeah,
it's one of my favorite books of all time.
Too.
So you understand this thought of like, there's the story, there's the external journey, and then there's the internal journey, and they're both happening all at once. Right. So the external journey was, I was living, I was doing the whole corporate thing in New York City. And very quickly, I realized that I had built an entire identity based on my default conditioning, right? Based on everything. I didn't know that back then. I didn't have the language to explain what I was going through. But essentially, I understood that, oh my God, I built my entire life on who I think I should be, on what I think I should do. I did everything. I got the good grades. Went into the Ivy League school. I went into the job that was like the fancy New York City job that I should be, even though I don't even like New York. Like I did everything. And through a series of serendipitous events, as life loves to do, when we're off track, it throws us lots of signs as to why we need to stop what we're doing. But I chose to listen. And I embarked on what I can describe a profound soul journey where I left everything in my life in New York City behind. I booked a one-way ticket and I challenged myself to circumnavigate the globe by couch surfing, never using the website. So what that means, Mike, is that I traveled the world and I would sleep in people's homes, but I didn't use the website. What I did was what we're doing right now. I'd say, Mike, I'm going to Vancouver. Do you know somebody in Vancouver, or can you offer me your couch? And you'd be like, yeah, you can stay with me. Or I have my cousin who lives in Toronto, and I traveled the entire world through friends of friends, strangers that I would meet in the world, in just like in traveling. In the course of 9 months, I traveled to 18 countries and I stayed in the homes of over 70 strangers. And this book tells you the story of what I found on the other side. Now, I won't give away the full punchline, but what happened was, in the process of me saying yes to my soul and listening to my intuition and actually saying, life is so much more than what I ever thought it could be. And I'm going to throw myself into the abyss, and I'm going to trust that the net is going to appear. I'm going to learn how to trust in humanity. I'm going to learn how to trust in something greater than myself. And I'm going to choose to live a life of purpose, even though I'm not, and I have zero evidence, and I don't know if it's going to work out. I'm going to go for it. And what started to happen is every person that I met on the road had a story to tell me about their lives. And that story taught me everything I needed to know about who I was, what the world was showing back at me. I would ask myself questions, and then the next day I would meet someone on the road that would give me exactly the answer to the question I've been asking myself, even though I didn't ask them the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to see that there's a different way to navigate life. There's a more easeful way to be in relationship with life. And I also realized that for me to become who I wanted to be, I had to burn it all down. Hence the name, The Burning Ground. I had to put my old identity in the fire. I had to face my fears. I had to look at all the trauma that I had been suppressing, avoiding, distracting myself from. I had to look at myself all the way, and I had to walk through the burning ground to find out who I was meant to be on the other side. And I can tell you, as frustrating as it was sometimes that this book took me 10 freaking years to publish, I can tell you, Mike, that looking back at the story, it is an absolute blessing in disguise, because now, 10 years later, I can put a stake in the ground and I can stand for that which I wrote in the book. I can stand for it 10 years later and continue to reaffirm that when we change the story, when we choose to let go of our old identities, when we choose to be in service to something greater than ourselves, and when we give ourselves the fighting chance to live a life full of meaning and greatness, that's what we're going to find on the other side. But we've got to be willing to put it all in the fire, because God's not going to write us a contract. There's no guarantees. And there's no like, this is going to work out and this is when it's going to look like. It's going to require us to take a leap. And so that is what this book endeavors to showcase. And it is written as both my story, my hero's journey, but also as a companion and a guide for anyone who's navigating a really big life or career transition right now and wants to actually be accompanied through their own internal journey of what this actually looks like. There's soul inquiry prompts inside. This very same questions I asked myself to overcome the biggest fears of my life. And so someone will not only be very entertained by the story, but they will also be guided and accompanied in terms of how do I affect change in my own life.
I can't wait to read it.
It's
Celinne,
great.
thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your grace. I've appreciated being in conversation with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.